The AeroPress. It's been the king of home brewing since its inception almost 2 decades ago. And there's lots of reasons for that. It's easy to brew with, it's portable, it's indestructible. You can do cold brew type of steeps in it, you can do hot brew type of steeps, concentrated things, pour over types of things. It's a versatile brewer that has garnered the attention of people all over the world since Alan Adler's release of it. And since then, no one's really taken it on in the market. Until now. This is the OXO Rapid Brewer, and I've been asked so many times to take a look at one. So I spent like $35 on Amazon and had it shipped to me. And it is a unique brewer to say the least. I've read lots of different people's reactions to this, and so many people have said it's replaced their AeroPress that they've used for multiple years because of its simplicity of use and preferred brews. I'm not necessarily making that claim, but I think it's an interesting one to keep in mind because of the longevity of AeroPress, but also their recent acquisition and subsequent increase in price for their product. Now this, with certain deals, you can get down to around $25. As I said, I got mine for around $35, which is close to what a new AeroPress costs. And there's a bit more going on with this right here. So let's jump right into reviewing this OXO Rapid Brewer. We're gonna brew some cold brew with it, as well as some hot brew. Now the plastic here is from the Triton type of material that is very popular right now with home brewing equipment. So we have kind of a catch cup, also kind of a dispenser. It has a nice little spout on it. Then we have the main part itself. We unscrew this top. Whoops. Tamper. Of course, we have a little plastic tamper that you can tamp your grounds with. This is where the coffee goes, and then you have the bottom similar to an espresso basket. So it's like a mesh filter on the bottom. Now you can put some sort of paper filter on top of that, but that's what we're working with, is essentially an espresso basket base. Then we continue to unscrew, and you have the water chamber, which actually sits like this. This is very familiar. We have a water distribution type of screen here, similar to that on the top of a pulsar, similar to that on the top of a tricklet, and then the water kind of sits right up here, and they even have a nice little line so you know where to fill up the water if you're not using a scale. This also is made from that Triton plastic material. And then we have this piece here. You may be wondering what this is. It looks like the bottom of like a Stanley mug or something, but in reality, you take it, you flip it, and you do a little twisty-roo, and it's a pump. So it's kind of like a bike pump where you're building pressure. It pushes out air and it builds pressure into this water chamber itself, which forces water through the grounds and into your final cup. Now to give you an idea on height, a fully extended AeroPress is about 2 inches or about 3-4 centimeters shorter. So that's kind of what we're working with here. Now, of course, if you take away the cup, or if you put a cup with this, obviously it gets a little taller. So it would be a little taller with the cup underneath, but you get the idea on the height.
Place finely ground coffee in the coffee basket. Fill to the lower line for hot. Fill to the upper line for cold. Use the tamper to firmly and evenly press the coffee down.
So they want you to take coffee, put it straight in here onto this filter, and tamp it down. Whenever you are wanting to use some sort of immersion type of brew, a tamped bed is not ideal because the water can't really penetrate that tamped bed in order to immerse with the coffee itself. Same thing with like espresso. If you're letting water sit on top of that puck, as we know, it's not going to infiltrate the puck. And considering they also recommend a really finely ground coffee, almost like espresso, you're not getting water into that puck until you begin to press, which is going to make essentially a weaker style of espresso. So you can get, 4 or 5 ounces or like 150 mils of a highly concentrated coffee into that final bin. We'll try one of those. We'll try, something that I'm just playing with off the top of my head, and we'll try a cold brew because they say you can do cold brew with a 5-minute steep. Now what OXO recommends is to use around 1/4 of a cup or around 20 grams of coffee and then fill the water up to this line, let it steep for a little bit, and then press through with 4 to 5 pumps. And then they say to dilute like 1 to 2, 1 to 3, or whatever to your preference. Yes, I'm using a nice grinder. It doesn't matter what grinder you use. I'm using this because it's plugged in and we're good to go. Now, I did not go nearly as fine as they kind of suggest. It just hurts me to do that for some sort of percolation brew. I don't do that with AeroPress either. So I went with, somewhat fine, much finer than I would ever do for even AeroPress. But let's go ahead and give this a little firm tamp, it says. We're going to do what we're told. So anyway, we have that. We're gonna screw this on, and we should have about 2 centimeters, about 1.5 inches between the shower screen and the liquid. And I'm just gonna measure the water to see how much it actually takes to fill it all the way up to that line. To get to the line, I'm at 164 grams. It says to let it steep. Actually, I think it says let steep, then screw it on and pump. But as you can see, some liquid's already coming through because this is essentially a no bypass brew right now. So because I went a little coarser than they suggest, I'm actually getting some escape, which that means it is actually immersing. That being said, it's probably not evenly immersing because it is on the finer end of things and tamped. But we'll go ahead and let it sit. Now, I did see someone point out that this is like a cheaper tricklet or a cheaper pulsar, which is an interesting thing because yes, if you go coarse enough, you will be able to get a pour-over-like brew using that mesh filter. And honestly, with a tamped bed, the bed should maintain integrity enough to where you shouldn't really get much going through if you use it as a pour-over. But again, I think you'll get uneven extraction unless you're using really coarse grounds. So we've been sitting for probably 45 seconds. Maybe I should have gone as fine as they said, but I just don't think it would have tasted nearly as good as what this could potentially be. All right, then we just screw this on, and now we pump. And you can feel the pressure building, like I feel it as I pump, but now it's got more than enough pressure left in there to get all the coffee through. And it's hissing because we had so much pressure in there. You can't push to hiss like on an AirPress. You got to be a bit careful because it'll build pressure in here and it'll keep pushing it out because there's no escape going upwards. But anyway, there we have our brew. Super concentrated, 1 to 8 recipe. Of course, I got to know what the TDS is. It'll probably be something like 2.6 or something. Normally a filter is around 1.3 to 1.4. This will require you, of course, to dilute it down. It's actually higher than I thought. It's at 3.05, it looks like. So very, very concentrated. So what you're supposed to do now is we're gonna take a cup, we're gonna pour this in. And there is, of course, sludge in there. There was some sludge at the base of this. You can kind of see some of the grounds there now, which is going to happen with a mesh filter, especially when you add pressure to it. If we were to let that just kind of go on its own, it likely could have stayed quite clean. That's the whole point of like that pure over all glass filter, is you're relying on the cake filtration as opposed to a filter. So it likely would have stayed pretty clean had we not added pressure, but adding the pressure, it's going to force those fines to migrate. It's going to force some particulates to get through, force some of the colloids that otherwise would have been filtered out. But anyway, we have about 135.6 yield here, and they say to do like a 2 to 1. So that means we should add, 130 or so grams of water. So this is going to be really hot water, but we're going to go ahead and go up to about 260, 270, if it'll fit in this cup. I think with the widening brim, it should get close. Ooh, we're pushing limits today, baby. Boom. All right, so we did that to about a 1 to 2. Good luck tasting that, Lance. We're going to use the Ligma spoon. Let's get in. Give it a little stir. At a 1 to 2 dilution, we're still sitting at like a 1.6 TDS, which is still pretty chewy for me, but a lot of people actually tend to enjoy that. But let's go ahead and take a sip. I mean, it tastes pretty good. I'm gonna let it cool down for a little bit, so let's skip forward in time. It's nice. I mean, it has that, that muddy type of AirPress type of thing going on, but a lot of people really enjoy that thick body, buttery, creamy type of experience. And this is with a somewhat lightly roasted coffee. It's got really nice sweetness. It's balanced well. It tastes somewhat like an AirPress brew due to that pressure that we're using to get it through. If you wanted less pressure, you can pump once, let the pressure dissipate, pump once, let the pressure dissipate, pump once, let the pressure dissipate, and really have a much lower pressure brew. One of the things I like with the AirPress is I can manually go as slow as I want to ensure I'm not disturbing the bed that much and forcing things into my cup. And so but this, I mean, it is easy. You can put in a ton of coffee in here, make a heavy concentrate, pour it into different people's cups, and then dilute their cups and have full cups of coffee. You could do a 40-gram dose in here, no problem. So yeah, that's interesting. Now I want to try something a little bit more my speed. So let's play around and have a different style of cup going on. I'm going to just go off script. I've got 15 grams of coffee that I'm putting in, a much coarser grind size, like almost where I do my V60s. And then we're gonna go ahead and screw on this top. I'm not tamping it. We'll start the timer. I'm gonna do 45 grams like it's a bloom and just see how the water runs through there, just out of curiosity. I also have a paper filter. I put an AirPress filter on the bottom. So there are some drips going. That's good, that's good. I mean, if I add more water, it'll add more pressure to help get it through, which I will do at 30 seconds. But I wanted to fit as much water in here as possible. So we're gonna see what happens. I'm pushing limits, okay? I'm gonna go to 250, if I can. Yes, I can. So the pressure from the water, from that gravity, is forcing more of the brew to go through, so that's nice. I'm gonna let it go for a bit. Now it's been steeping for about a minute with water, regardless of the amount of water. Now I'm gonna push this on. And at a minute 30, I'll give some light pumps. Actually, this creates a vacuum effect, so it's not gonna drain anymore. Honestly, if you pump like this, it's almost like an AirPress, it feels like. And now we're also running into an obvious issue where the catch cup's not big enough for 250. But YOLO. And we'll finish in this one. It's also a good lesson on extraction. You see how light the color is of the coffee coming out now? Actually, that last little bit's probably not even needed. That was during the hiss. We'll go ahead and take it, though. We'll take it. I'm not measuring extraction because I didn't take the yield weight, but we'll measure TDS. All right, that's sitting at like a 1.25, which is actually great for me. So we did about a 1:17 ratio. That's fantastic. That is super sweet. Really nice. It's got high clarity and it's sweet. Because we put it through that paper filter in there, so we can take a look at what this bed looks like. Because I did not tamp. So we were able to get a little bit of pressure going through it without, approaching that fine grind size. We're able to get a more even flow through it, but of course, then you can't really use this cup when you're doing such a big brew. But this gives me a somewhat decently depth puck. This is similar to an espresso basket, so at 15 grams, it's a bit thin. I would like a bit thicker, but then of course, if you're wanting to do, not a concentrate, then you're going to need to do a bigger cup. Now, what's great is you can also do the AirPress technique that I showed some years ago that saves old coffee or dark coffee to get acidity out of it, which is a highly concentrated brew, which is essentially a 1-to-4 ratio, and you're under extracting then diluting. This is kind of ideal for that. You can throw 40 grams of coffee in here, pull out 160 grams of coffee, and then dilute it by, I guess at that point, 130 grams of water or so, and you'll have an insane cup of coffee that does a really nice job. You're likely going to see a lot of similarities between the cups you brew here and the cups you brew on the AirPress, depending on your approach. When you use the normal AirPress, people get upset that so much water is trickling through. I actually like that, hence what I did here, allowing 30 or 40 grams to go through before I actually started the pressurized part of it. I think it's a nice kind of in-between of percolation and then kind of like this forced percolation, similar to an espresso machine or to an AirPress. A lot of people like the inverted method on the AirPress. A lot of people don't like it, but with the inverted method, you're having to invert it the end, and that's going to cause that bed to mix all up, that gravel effect where the bigger bits go to the top and the fines could clog that filter, and so you're having to give it a little more force than you otherwise would need to due to that kind of sediment layer that will form. Now, of course, you can make this a lot different than an AirPress, and you can make an AirPress a lot different than this, but there is kind of like a Venn diagram going on where you can get similar brews there in the center. Ugo needs to try this.
Perfect.
I knew it. Let's do one of their, supposed 5-minute cold brews. We're going to see how that tastes, and then we'll end it. I've got 40 grams of coffee ready. That's kind of what's called for when you want to pour to the line with room temp water. So let's go ahead and get this in the basket. Now, this is a ton of coffee. So if you're drinking this on your own, my goodness, may God be with your soul. Gonna kind of settle it a bit and tamp it, as they say. And this one I did do a slightly finer grind on just to get closer to what they want. It's just hard for me to go too fine. And we're gonna put this right on there. Now, we get our room temp water. I'm gonna go and start the timer and fill it up. Now they recommend doing 5 minutes and then pressing it through. So we're gonna let it immerse for 5 minutes and we'll press it through. So we fill it up to the line. I'll go ahead and put this on so none of it does end up dripping through. Create that kind of vacuum effect. We're just gonna let it immerse for 5 minutes. We'll be right back, and 5 minutes is over now. Well, I lied. We're not at the 5 minute mark. We're at the 3 minute mark, but I just wanted to point out, we've been sitting here 3 minutes, and as you see, this is still just water, which is what you would expect, because down here, it's not able to penetrate the grounds very well. So it's very interesting that they want you to have a 5 minute immersion when the majority of water is still relying on percolation. Now, my theory is, assuming they are right in their approach, is that the water is slowly going to saturate, very slowly, those grounds and essentially open them up for diffusion. So the idea here is maybe to help with off-gassing. Off-gassing would have to go down. It can't go up, of course. We'd see bubbles. And to saturate the grounds, to have them ready for diffusion so that when percolation hits, it is actually somewhat effective with colder water. So that's kind of my thought process here as to why we're steeping it for 5 minutes when the majority of the water is just kind of sitting there. It's like pointlessly sitting here. It's literally not doing anything. And you would expect, because there's contact of the water between the shower screen to the bed, you would expect something to come up through that shower screen, but we're not really seeing anything. So I'm a bit skeptical on the 5 minute steep, unless, maybe I could do this and take it out and see if the grounds are actually fully wet. But anyway, it was just an interesting thing as I'm sitting here watching. I would have expected maybe a little trickle, at least, of some oils or something coming up, of just some sort of, I don't know, sign that something's going on. But so anyway, let's go ahead and start this pump action. Oh, this is concentrate, baby. We're going to meet some pressure here. I'm actually having to give it some decent force. Yeah, this is definitely where the majority of the extraction is happening. No question about that. As you can see, when I'm done pressing, there's still liquid coming out, which shows you there is pressure still in that chamber. It's a highly pressurized chamber at this point. Every pump is a little harder to push through. And again, this is going to be harder. If this was hot water, it would fly through. Cold water, it's much more difficult because it's not able to get through those grounds as easily as hot water. Since hot water has so much energy, it's much easier to get into the grounds to do the extraction, all that good stuff. So I'm going to stop right about now. It looks like that water is essentially at the screen, and I'm going to let the leftover pressure push the rest through. Yep. And I see at the bottom of the screen the water's left, so there may be water still in the puck, but I don't want that in there because it's mesh filter. I don't want to force some of those particulates through that I don't need, essentially. And there goes the hiss, right on time. Now, I notoriously do not like cold brew, especially like when it's steeped for like 24 hours. We'll see how I feel about this. I'll definitely, what I'll do is I'll pour some into a cup. I'll dilute it like a 1 to 2, maybe probably 1 to 4 actually. And then I'll do another where I'm just tasting the concentrate. That's really not bad. If I toss that over ice, I would actually probably enjoy that. Ooh. Taste that.
I like it.
Yeah, right?
Yes.
It's
nice.
All right, well, we may have found a cold brew that I don't mind. I mean, it's with a good bean, so there's that, but I don't react like that very often, especially not to cold brew, which I've called dirty sock water. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. All right, let's try this. Yeah, that's undrinkable. I would never recommend drinking. That's undrinkable. That's tar. That is tar. You dilute it with the right amount. I did about 150 mils. I did 120 mils of dilution. That was money. That right there was money. Oh, my Lanta. In fact, I'm going to make another one. So I'm going to bring this to my wife after I film, and she's going to love it. Let me just get the dilution right. That should work. Sweet. Well, I've got 2 more of these, and I've actually found a cold brew that I enjoy. And that changes everything. No, I was already really impressed with the hot brews, genuinely. I never use my AirPress, and it's not because it doesn't make good coffee. I just don't really, like faffing around with it. And the reality is, even if I did enjoy this more, I probably am not going to faff around with that either. I'm very lazy. I like to do a V60. It's super quick. It hits what I want, and it's good to go. I do think from the brews I've had of this and how easy it was to get good brews whenever you throw their rules out the window, at least for me, I think I do prefer this. I think overall it's more novel in its build. I really like the pumping mechanism and the fact that you just push down. Travels really easily. It has everything you need inside. It's got a better water distribution system. It's not as easy and quick as the 3-piece AirPress, which literally has the chamber, the plunge, and the cap. And so that's going to win the hearts of many, and I understand that. But the cold brew I just had, and the daggum, just everything else. But I mean, I'm a big fan of it. Do I think it's leaps and bounds over AirPress? No. Do I think I personally would slightly prefer this? Yes. Now, OXO is a company that they're always putting out things that are almost incredible, and actually for the price point oftentimes are quite nice. Their OXO 8-cup brewer I reviewed on my Instagram before I started YouTube like 4 or 5 years ago, and I was very impressed with their 8-cup brewer. It's one of the better, it's the best budget drip coffee option on the market. The only things better for me are like the Sage/Breville Precision Brewer Plus, the Ratio, and then the Aiden. I know they've made some hand grinders and things that people at home have been very impressed by. I did buy it. I have not spoken with the company at all. This is just, I had people asking me to review it, and so I figured why the heck not, right? And now it looks like I enjoy at least one bean on at least this style of cold brew. Do not sit here and ever look at a video and go, I need to buy it. If anything, my videos are supposed to be education first, so hopefully you learned something in here, at least with how I approached dialing in off the cuff, like, oh, why did he make those decisions? And then, maybe understand how the mechanisms in here work, understanding how the pressure is working, how that's going to affect the gradients of the coffee bed, how pressure affects the displacement of particles into your cup, things like that. As I'm going through, I really want to try and get across to you, not just look at this product, should you buy it or should you not. That's never the goal of these videos. It's to hopefully educate while also inform people who may be in the market and might be wanting to buy it but don't have any resource other than random Reddit threads of people with confirmation bias. This will be going away to someone. Honestly, I may just give it to Ugo because he really wants it. And so I don't even keep the things that I'm really looking at when it comes to these types of reviews. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider hitting the like and subscribe. Genuinely helps the channel a lot. And I think that's it for today. So to end on, I hope that you brew something tasty today. And cheers.